So thanks all very much for giving us your time today. My name is Gareth Harcombe. I'm Energy and Sustainability Manager at Cardiff Council, and I'll be speaking on the challenge today. Thanks for your time. On the screen there, you can just see a few arrangements for the day. So other than presenters, microphones and cameras are turned off for bandwidth reasons. There's Q&A at the end of the session, and I think someone said there's up to about 150 people registered for the event. So in order for us to be able to manage that fairly and appropriately, we're asking if you can put your questions in the chat, and then we'll deal with them at the end, try and group questions together and get through as many as we can. And also to note as well that the event is being recorded, so you can watch it back again. And for those people who weren't able to make it, just that point that it'll be recorded from now on. Okay. So just the agenda for today. Just briefly on this, I'll give an introduction, and we'll introduce our partner organisation, partner authority in this, which is Monmouth County Council, represented by Kath Fallon. We have Rhiannon Lucas from Innovate UK talking about Small Business Research Fund and how that works. And then Liz Rees from the Cardiff Capital Region, who are the funders of this project, just talking more generally about the Challenge Fund. This is one of many challenges, setting a bit of context. Kath and I will then come back and give the substantive part of the presentation, which is about what this challenge is about, setting the scene, why we're doing it, what we're asking of you. And then Josh Barnett from Simply Do will come and give a kind of a dummy run of how to apply through the Simply Do portal. It'll be a very short break and then a Q&A session to follow. So that's the agenda for today. So as I said, I'm Gareth Harcombe, Energy and Sustainability Manager for the Council. I know very little about food, certainly very little about agriculture, but I do lead on sustainability matters. And food is something, I suppose, surprisingly, that the council is very engaged with. We feed thousands of school kids every day. We have allotments. We have an economic development role, and food is we hope, a growing sector in the city. Lots of health issues to do with food, obviously, and sadly, an increasing issue with the growing need of growing demand on food banks. And social equity and a whole host of other things. So lots of reasons for us to be in this space, which we'll go into in the presentation. Kath, I don't know if you want to just give a few words on Monmouthshire just before we start.
Thanks, Gareth. Yes, Kath Fallon, Head of Enterprise and Community Animation with Monmouthshire County Council. I have the strategic lead for food, but also strategic procurement and also community development. So as Gareth mentioned, sort of that link into our communities with community fridges, food banks, etc. We just think this is a really good opportunity to engage with business and with organisations around this really exciting agenda. We feel we can have a huge impact with the funds that are available. So we're very much looking forward to all the applications that come in. So thank you ever so much, everybody, for attending today. And I'll pass over now to Rhiannon, is it, Gareth, who can pick up the SBRI element.
Thanks, guys, and thank you all very much for joining. And most importantly, thank you very much to our hosts for inviting me today. So for those of you that are not aware, Innovate UK is the government's innovation agency. We cover every sector from health, space, agri-tech, you name it, we're involved in it. So I'm just here today to give you a little overview of SBRI and a bit about the process. Next, please. Thank you. So SBRI is a widely used mechanism for procuring innovation. In fact, it's been used by over 100 public sector organisations who combined have invested over £1 billion to date. It's actually pre-commercial procurement, so it varies massively from grants in that we're actually buying a service for research and development from applicants. We're looking for really innovative services or products that aren't already available in the market. It's also a really good way of supporting businesses and organisations. So the money you receive from SBRI is actually counted as trading income, and in effect, it's a contract with a public sector organisation. SBRI follows a fairly structured approach, although it is quite a flexible process, but we typically follow phases. So we go through a development phase and a prototype leading to an end product, usually demonstrated in a real world environment. And that's all working with the lead customer or your end user to make sure that what you're developing remains fit for purpose and that there is still a need. Next, please. So SBRI is a bit of a win-win for businesses and for government. It's all about risk and benefit sharing. It's meant to be a very balanced approach to innovation. It supports businesses, and the recent evaluation study that we've had shows that average annual sales grow by about 30%. It provides credibility as well, so be that attracting further investment or to grow your business. The credibility that you get from having a government contract shouldn't be underestimated. Not only that, but you've got the involvement of your lead customer from the very outset when you're developing your product or developing your technology, so that at the end, when it comes to commercializing this, your product is absolutely fit for the needs of the customer. And I guess there's very few situations, certainly in the public sector and government, where you would get the opportunity to be involved like this. Next, please. It also supports government, which from my perspective, we want to see the government innovate, we want to do better, we want to provide efficiencies through improved technologies. So it gives us access to new innovative technologies, because otherwise, if the solution existed to our problem, we'd already be out there purchasing it. So it doesn't, so we need you, the innovation community, to come up with better ways for us to do things. It also broadens our supply base as well. So typically, I guess we've, unless you're on a government framework or you've been involved in government procurement previously, it's quite challenging for suppliers to access public sector contracts. This gives you that foot into the door, but it also gives us, as government, the opportunity to work with people that we wouldn't have previously, which gives us a whole new range of ideas, different ways of working, and different ways of thinking. We also get direct involvement with the development of this product. Like I said, we can be involved in the testing, the prototyping, and hopefully we then get improved services and efficiencies through this technology. Next. So some of the key features of SBRI, and as I said, this varies hugely from grants in that it's a 100% funded contract. So this is the UK implementation of EU pre-commercial procurement. So it falls outside of subsidy control and currently falls outside the procurement regulations as well. There is a single contract with the lead applicant, and you guys would then subcontract to make sure you've got all the skills you need to fulfill your contract. The intellectual property remains with the supplier. You're encouraged to exploit your intellectual property. So all foreground IP developed remains with you, but there are certain usage rights for the public sector in terms of royalty-free licenses. And this just makes sure that we're not paying twice for something that we've paid to develop and then paid to use as well. So it's open to all organisations. There's no limit, no size, whether you're a tier 1, whether you're academia, business, SME. As long as you can demonstrate a route to market, then you're eligible to apply. We particularly welcome applications from companies not engaged in the sector, so where you've got technology that has been used elsewhere that you could develop or amend to suit. then yes, we absolutely want to see people coming from outside our usual sector. Next. So as I said, SBRI follows a fairly structured process. This is just to give you a sort of high level view, what it typically looks like. There's not always a phase 3, it can be single phase, but at every point we would down select from the successful project from the previous phase to make sure that we then develop and take through the best ideas to the next phase. Any procurement or implementation of the solutions is a completely separate standalone procurement exercise. Next. And that's it from me. So there's our contact details there, our social media pages, and thank you very much. I hope that was a brief whistle-stop tour of SBRI for you.
Okay, thanks, Rhian. Next, we've got Liz Rees. Liz works at the Cardiff Capital Region, and as I said, they provided the funding for this project. It's part of a much broader challenge fund, which is looking at all sorts of different innovation in a wide array of sectors. So I'll hand over to Liz to explain that to you.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. Hi everybody, my name's Liz Rees and I'm the Challenge Fund Project Officer, so I work within the CCR Cardiff Capital Region on the Challenge Fund. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what is the Cardiff Capital Region and what is the Challenge Fund. Next slide, please. Oh, there's a slide missing. Can we go back one? Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to explain a bit about what is the Cardiff Capital Region for those of you that aren't aware. So it's often abbreviated to the CCR, if you're wondering what that acronym was. So it's driven by an agreement called the City Deal, which basically is a unique collaboration between the 10 local authorities highlighted there in red in South East Wales, with the UK government and with Welsh Government. And it's very much designed to build on the strengths of the region, so the high skill base and the presence of 3 universities within the area. So it's looking at these to accelerate economic growth and productivity within the region. So the programme as a whole aims to deliver targeted investments in skills, infrastructure, innovation and priority industry sectors and also businesses. It is a long programme, so we're in this for the long haul. It's 20-year programme, and the outcomes, some of the outcomes for the programme are 25,000 jobs, to leverage in an additional 4 billion of private sector investment in the area, and increase the GVA by 5%. Next slide, please. I'm just going to run through the priority sectors and areas of focus that I mentioned in the previous slide. So the priority sectors for the CCR are compound semiconductors, which I'm informed is very technical bits of equipment which are found in most electronic equipment such as mobile phones. FinTech, which is financial technology. Cybersecurity, the creative economies. MedTech, which is medical technology. Transport, energy and environment. And the key areas of focus are skills, digital, sites and property, and innovation. So the Challenge Fund comes under that key area of focus, innovation. Next slide, please. So what is the Challenge Fund? So basically it's a £10 million fund. It's delivered by Cardiff University, our partners there who are our delivery agency. And it allows the public sector, so by that we mean local government, health boards, other public sector agencies, the third sector can be involved too, to engage with businesses, with the market, to develop innovative solutions to challenges, problems, issues they may have with service delivery and processes within their organisations. Social solutions must be new and not off the shelf. So we're looking for brand new solutions to things that can't already exist. So otherwise that would just be a straightforward procurement of a product that's already there. Any solutions must be able to be commercialised and they must be scalable, preferably at pace. And the final one's really important. So solutions must drive economic impact for the CCR region. So looking at building local wealth for South East Wales. And that could be through job creation, supply chain opportunities, etc. But that is a very important part of the fund. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are the current priority themes which were decided on by the 10 local authorities at the start of the process. So probably 2 to 3 years ago now. We are currently looking at changing these because obviously things change. 1 to 2 years ago, obviously there was the pandemic, so we were changing things to try and accommodate some support there. At the moment, we've got cost of living crisis, we've got the whole issues around the war in Ukraine, energy, etc. So we will be looking to change these in the future, just to reflect what's going on in the modern world. So the current priorities are 3 of them, which cover everything really. So accelerating decarbonisation, which could be about air quality, housing, public transport issues. We've got improving health and well-being, which could be about combating care, loneliness, clinical interventions, etc. And then we've got supporting and enhancing and transforming communities. So this could be to do with regeneration, town centres, rural communities, food security, which this challenge comes under. Next slide, please. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a flavour of the current challenges that the Challenge Fund, along with other partners such as Welsh Government, have funded. So I'll just go through these. So first of all, there was the tracheostomy challenge. This was a COVID rapid response challenge. Basically, the Health Board couldn't deliver training in person during the pandemic. So there was a challenge to develop alternative training methods during the pandemic when people couldn't meet face to face. So this went through the SBRI process, as mentioned by Rhian, and the number of companies, I think they started off with 3 or 4 at phase 1, and then they sort of scaled down to 1 company, Rescape, which are based in Cardiff, I believe. And basically they developed technology which was like immersive virtual reality, so clinicians could learn how to do tracheostomies, improve their skills, etc., where they couldn't do it in person. That was £400,000. That was funded by the Challenge Fund and Welsh Government. Current challenges, we've got 4 electric vehicle challenges, 1 in Caerphilly, 1 in Merthyr, and 2 for Monmouthshire County Councils. They're all different, but the broad aim is to transition the local authority fleet vehicles to EV. And in total, the 4 projects are 1.5 million. Sorry, there is a typo there, I noticed. That should say status. So the Merthyr project is live. They're currently on site, digging up the ground. The Monmouthshire one's imminent and Caerphilly is slightly delayed, but they'll all be done this financial year. They will also act as demonstrators for other local authorities who are looking to transition their fleet. Finally, the endoscopy challenge, so another health-related one. This is live at the moment and it's aiming to address the very long waiting list for endoscopy procedures in Wales. And we've approved £750,000 for that. That's another one for Cardiff and Vale. Next slide, please. Okay, so for more information, you can email our delivery partners at Cardiff University. I would strongly recommend that you have a look at our website, which is challengefund.wales. We are developing a place for solution providers there. My colleague Cheryl's just put the link in the chat if anyone's interested. And we're also on Twitter at CCR Challenge. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Liz. Okay, so just moving on to the challenge itself, which we call Sustainable Production and Supply of Food. So just to recap, our interest as county councils and representatives of the region here are many. Obviously, we're interested in economic development, and Liz has gone through that. We are interested directly in food. We purchase a lot of it for school children, etc. But we have local plan development policies which preserve land for agriculture. We have concerns about transportation around the city and deliveries, food waste, all sorts of reasons for us to be involved in this. We're not experts in food, but we come across it often. So what we were going to do is just give you a few of the kind of national and local policy drivers for this, just to elaborate a little bit on why we're interested, and then just go into the detail of what the challenge is and how it works. So most of you will have noticed that lots of stuff has been happening recently, and here's just some of them. They've been touched on already, but the exit from the EU has changed some of our supply chain issues and trade deals on the horizon and that kind of thing. Obviously, COVID-19 hugely challenging, particularly for those vulnerable people who in the food area, at least, who needed continued access to food. Climate change, obviously, different parts of the world are suffering differently. We've had a pretty serious drought in this country this year. The conflict in Europe and elsewhere does have an impact on supply chains, and obviously in the particular case of the Ukraine on energy costs, and all of that is in a time of unprecedented cost of living pressures. So obviously supply chains, prices, the weather, all of these things are impacting on what was already a reasonably challenging situation. In Wales, the Welsh Government have put in place the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, and we all in the public sector in Wales are kind of guided by that in pretty much everything we do now. We need to operate in a way that the needs of the present are met without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And so there's some concerns about, biodiversity, climate change, what are the impacts of intensive farming, all those sorts of things, but as well, some real issues on health and well-being, economy, all the rest. Welsh Government themselves have developed a specific strategy on food, or a vision for the food and drink industry from 2021. They're looking for a strong and vibrant Welsh food and drink sector, but one that has some of the most environmentally and socially responsible supply chains in the world. And obviously, one of the four goals there is sustainability, reaching the highest levels of environmental sustainability in doing that, building an economy that also, enhances and delivers all of our other ambitions. So then Cardiff Council itself, we are in response to the climate emergency, which we declared a few years ago, have put together a One Planet Cardiff strategy that's looking at a whole bunch of different areas, and you can see some of them there: energy, waste, transport, water, built environment, green infrastructure, and food. We're looking to be a net zero council by 2030. And that includes not just our activities, but net zero in terms of the things that we buy as well, which is a huge challenge. And we're hoping, as a kind of a convener in the city, that we can work with all of our many and various partners in the area and the region, in fact, to look to see if we can accelerate that decarbonisation journey for the city. And then, as part of that, we also have an independent food strategy. Linked but separate, because the food strategy also contains drivers around health and well-being, and you can see the five goals there. So tackling food inequalities, and there are many in the city. Sadly, the life expectancy between the wealthiest and the poorest wards in this city is something like 13 years difference. There are areas of the city where car ownership is very, very low, and the presence of fresh food shops is very low too. So some real spatial issues there in terms of inequalities, and obviously more and more people rely on our food banks. We'd like to increase the local production of food, both for economic and environmental sustainability reasons. We've got something there which is Eating Out Well. We are a regulatory body, regulates some of the hygiene and health and safety areas of the food economy. But as I said, we also feed lots of school kids, we cater, we do all sorts of things, and we want to make sure that that experience is a healthy, sustainable one. And in doing all of that, we see food as a driver for prosperity. We see a real, that this should be delivering jobs, this should be delivering security for people, for local people. And we've also got fostering food partnerships, because we know absolutely that we can't do this alone. We may be in a relatively central position to promote and talk about this, but we can't deliver it. So food partnerships are crucial. I'm going to hand over briefly to Kath, who's going to give you the Monmouth perspective as well. We are working in partnership, as I said, on this. The two authorities leading the project but representing the regions. So I'll hand over to Kath.
Thanks, Gareth. Thanks ever so much. So from a Monmouthshire perspective, we've been working sort of very closely with our local food businesses for over 20 years now, and particularly in terms of adding value to local products. So working very closely sort of within our communities in terms of how we look at sustainable food production, how we look to develop new ranges. Very recently, we've changed administration, new Labour Council now, and actually tomorrow, so virtually quite hot off the press, we're actually going to be tabling our corporate and community plan, which is very much focused around looking to be a zero carbon county, sort of with that alignment with Cardiff, really, supporting well-being, health and dignity. And part of our key priorities really are to be a green place to live, reducing those carbon emissions, making that positive contribution, particularly in terms of addressing the climate and nature emergency. But there's some specific actions then centred around supporting sustainable local agriculture and farming practices with public services and residents, you know, looking to consume more local and seasonal produce, how we get more local food onto to our local public plate, so to speak. So very much working closely with our strategic procurement unit, our catering managers, really to make sure that we can get as much food as possible locally, sort of from the producers into our kitchens, really. So this opportunity and this challenge really very much helps us to look at how we identify and develop those shorter local sustainable food supply chains, and importantly those innovative processes to look to how we can reduce food miles, bringing everything more local, and providing those opportunities for smaller local producers to get involved, really. That will enable us to extend our free school provision, which is actually going extremely well in Monmouthshire. The take-up is brilliant. A lot around, we do a lot of cooking from scratch, so those sort of school meals are good, they're healthy, they're nutritious. And we use that local produce really as much as we can. We make sure we procure that at a fair price, and hence why we want to work more closely with our local producers to enable them to start to produce what we need on our school menus, and to provide those opportunities to develop innovative food clusters as well, how we can support our wider rural local economy. So very much, you know, in keeping with the way we want to go in the future, and very much working with Cardiff, you know, we can see the benefits of that, really. We have recently set up our own Monmouthshire Sustainable Food Partnership, Food Monmouthshire, and very much aligned with sort of the ambitions of Cardiff's Food Partnership too. So very much sort of working together, really. So I'll hand back to you, Gareth, now.
Thanks, Kath. Just to recap then, you know, why we think change needs to happen. There's an economic driver for that. Relocalizing the food system could be transformational. We need new jobs. We need the sorts of jobs that will help to deliver a lower carbon future, and we need those to be here in our local communities. Environmental, the current food system's not really sustainable or resilient, and we've really experienced that in the last few years. 48% of all food consumed in the UK is imported from across the world. Some of that's lovely stuff, but is it all necessary, and at what cost is that happening? And then obviously, I mean, we're all aware of some of the really bad practices that happen in other countries, deforestation, forced labour. We want to be as far removed from all of that as we possibly can. And then there's social and health issues. So the severe obesity issues in Wales, the obesity is higher here than the rest of the UK, and there's a direct, you know, straight line between the affordability of food and the healthiness of it. Access to food, I mentioned visits in the city. Sorry, my dog is barking, apologies. And obviously all of that is putting into much sharper focus with the current cost of living crisis, energy and food prices soaring. Do you heat or do you eat? We've seen that in the press and report. So the challenge then, what we've tried to do is break this into two broad sectors. One, and Kath touched on this, is how do we increase the sustainable production of food in the region generating a positive economic and social impact. So are there different methodologies? Are there, you know, ways of intensifying that are in harmony with the environment? Are there ways of urban food growing? You know, how do we really increase the sustainable production of food in the region? And then secondly, and this is quite important, is how do we supply that nutritious and local food whilst ensuring a fair price for producers and the well-being of future generations? So, you know, there is good, healthy food available, for sure there is, but just to take the one example, I don't want to focus too much on schools, but there's a very, very tight budget in place to feed school children. We all want that supply to be better, but it's got to come in a way that makes sense economically as well. So it's not just the production of food, but the supply. How do we get the supply chains right, ensuring a fair price for producers and purchasers, and doing all of that in a way that is fit for purpose? So we are offering the chance to do either or both of these. We feel that in a sense they're linked, but people that are interested in bidding for this funding can apply themselves to both problems or to one or the other. And what's our offer? So in total, we are very, very pleased to have over £2 million of funding available. And the logic of this is that we'll do small bits of funding to get ideas developed into plans. Then when we have plans, we can develop those in the next stage to real life pilots and demonstrators, and then taking the best of those in that funnel picture that you saw earlier on to fully scaled up commercial propositions. So that's our offer, £2 million. It's a competition, I suppose. We're looking for you to bid. Really interested to hear your ideas and innovations, and we're here to be able to fund their development. So the three phases then, the first phase is feasibility, and these are contracts for up to 4 months and up to £50,000 each. It's quite difficult. Obviously, we've allocated a 400,000 budget for this stage. In a sense, the more we don't know how many good ideas we're going to get. So these are all kind of ballpark figures, really. But the budget limit on this stage is 400, and we anticipate funding up to 8 of those studies. A 4-month process to another competitive stage, which is for us to assess the best of those, to take them then on to the demonstrator phase. So this is to develop those ideas and those plans into pilots, into demonstrator applications. That phase, it's anticipated, will last for about 12 months. And we have £800,000 available for that. It's likely that if we selected 8 demonstrators, not all 8 will get through at this stage. So we will need to allocate the budget on a as needs basis. Again, quite difficult to estimate that, but we would hope that we'd be taking, I don't know, 4 to 6 projects through to this stage, but we'll need to wait and see, obviously. And then following that 12 months of kind of piloting and testing, there's an additional £1 million, which we're very pleased with. And in previous SBRIs, I have to say that, you know, you get a great idea and you bring it to a point where it could be commercialized, but the funding tends to run out at that stage. So we've been really careful in this one to make sure that there is more money to really work on the upscaling of those most promising projects that we've developed in the earlier stages. Okay, so what does the solve challenge look like? You can see the 2 challenges here, production and supply, and the economic, environmental, and social drivers. So we would have a solve challenge would give us improved economic output for the region in this sector, fair wages, better working conditions, better infrastructure, and actually a more broad stimulation of the local economy for others to get involved in those sorts of good practices. Environmental, obviously, we're hoping for lower food miles and storage emissions, processing emissions, all that kind of thing, reduced carbon, reduced food waste. and importantly, protecting or enhancing soil health, water quality, and biodiversity. I mean, some of these things are suffering at the moment, and we're looking for practices that do much for that. And then social as well, greater access to healthy, nutritious food, reduction in the horrible forced labour and deforestation things that go on elsewhere, better food education and training, particularly, you know, reaching out to school kids and future generations in how to source good, healthy, cheap food, and increased household food security, obviously. So I think Kath is going to come in now just to elaborate a little bit more on what we're looking for, what success looks like. So Kath, I'll hand over to you.
Great, thanks, Gareth. I think really in terms of what we're looking for, it's those innovative solutions that we've been discussing really. So how do we provide greater access to that healthy, nutritious food, providing that better quality food that's going to improve the health and well-being of our citizens, creating those resilient food supply chains, but really focusing on that open and equitable partnership. So how can we work better together? And improving capabilities throughout that supply chain so that the sector delivers competitive and sustainable products. So this is about, you know, really setting our stall out for the future and creating that efficient supply chain, which could be interpreted beyond economic benefits. So picking on those social and environmental considerations that Gareth has just mentioned. And importantly, supporting place-based economic development, very much about that local wealth building within the region. So how can we, you know, sort of improve that really, and importantly, protect and enhance our soil health, that water quality and biodiversity that, you know, particularly, for example, in Monmouthshire, we're experiencing currently in the Wye Valley, things are quite difficult for us. Thank you, Gareth. So in terms of what success looks like for problem one, in terms of how we increase the sustainable production of food in the region and generate positive economic, social, environmental impacts, we've really looked at sort of what our ambitions are in terms of by 2025, we want to have increased healthy local carbon production, looking at an innovative, sort of different innovative growing methods. So Gareth talked about rural and urban and what the opportunities might be there in terms of, you know, how we will have improved access to land and to support production and increase that consumption of local food. And also sort of local sustainable food production and land use for local sustainable food production as well. And importantly, looking at how we increase that food-related employment to ensure that it pays at least a national minimum wage. Thank you. And then in terms of problem two, how we supply that nutritious locally grown food, but ensuring we've got that fair price for producers to really make sure we're focusing on that well-being for future generations. So again, by 2025, you want to have increased that supply of nutritious locally grown food with a view to sort of increasing the volume and looking at that volume of locally grown food that's sourced and distributed also amongst our wholesalers. And making sure that we're increasing the number of shorter food supply chains, so how we shorten that at a local level, and increasing the opportunities we talked about to supply the public plate. So how do we get more sort of local fruit and veg onto our school menus, for example, but importantly, decreasing that food waste, you know, by looking at improving our supply and demand models. You know, whilst we appreciate that not all the solutions are going to contribute to all of these different metrics, it's important just to be mindful that, you know, the solution that you come up with actually does align to what we feel success looks like, because actually it's better for us, but also better for our region and our planet. So thank you, Gareth, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Kath. These are the three phases, and we thought, you know, we should drill into phase one at this stage. So the information pack has been available for some time. I'm sure most of you have had a look at it, and that's full of all sorts of information and some of the criteria that we'll be looking at. We'll talk a little bit more about how to apply a bit later on. But obviously, we need feasibility proposals to show how they address the targets and the metrics of the challenge. We're interested in a kind of a market research report which highlights areas for further upscaling. So that first phase is really going to be, you know, trying to convince the panel of adjudicators here that this really does have legs, this idea. We'd like to identify the positive and negative impacts of what you might have in mind, so that we're there ready to highlight and mitigate any negative impacts, but to promote the positive ones too. It may be that some of the ideas are proposed require land or test sites or partners. We can help a little bit in that. And you know, the councils, the region has access to land and that kind of thing. That might be we just need to know if that is a requirement. What might we need to work on to get you there? And we're interested partly because of this uncertainty about budgets and how many solutions we're going to fund. Like you to look at a couple of delivery options and budgets, so that we're able to contain the best ideas, but as many of those as possible. So that's phase one, and then I won't go into detail too much in phase two and phase three. There's plenty of time for us to disseminate information about those. But obviously, just to recap, phase two is about developing and evaluating prototypes, and phase three is about upscaling. Okay, so this is just a little brief snapshot of the timeline. So we're launching the challenge at the moment. The deadline for applications is the 2nd of December, and then we have an evaluation process. So just to reassure you, we've got quite a large panel of experts that will, in the food industry, people unlike me, who know about agriculture, who know about supply chains, who know about the health and well-being and all those sorts of other issues. They'll be helping us to evaluate and score the bids and making recommendations to the panel, which is made up of people from Cardiff Council, Monmouthshire Council, the City Region, and some of our host and funding organisations as well. So during December, we'll be calling in the most promising applicants to do a little presentation on their ideas, so that we can understand that a bit better before making a final decision on who to fund. That award will be in January, and then there'll be the 4-month feasibility stage. That will then lead to effectively another competition. So the best of those funded feasibilities will go through another evaluation process to get funding for phase two. That goes on for 12 months, and then again another evaluation of those, and the most promising are eligible for that final scale-up funding. So that's the timeline, which takes us through to 2025. Seems a long way away, but it'll come soon, I'm sure. So just a little bit of an update then. We had planned on doing an in-person Q&A session in a few weeks, but we are thrilled at the sheer number of people who've registered an interest in this project. But the downside of that is that we just don't think it's realistic to be able to talk in person to all of those people. So in place of that, we're going to make available a public Q&A portal on the Simply Do website, where everyone can pose a question, and everyone will be able to see the answers to those questions as well. So we think that's a fair and more equitable way of developing a frequently asked questions page, really. So please submit your questions over that period, and there's instructions on how to do that. As I said, the deadline for your challenge application is the 2nd of December, and we'll look at the way in which you do that through the portal in a second. Then there'll be the assessment process that I went through just now, with some expert assessors advising the main panel, and then onwards to the award of contracts on about the 9th of January, with the feasibility stage starting towards the end of January. So you can see some contacts and email addresses and phone numbers there for further questions. So I'm going to hand over now to Simply Do, who are going to explain the portal and what an application looks like, and run through that process.
Super. Thank you for that, Gareth. Hello, everyone. I'm Josh from Simply Do. I'm just going to spend the next 5 minutes walking you through the Simply Do platform, just so that you're aware what the challenge page looks like, where certain information is, how you create your idea, where the sections are, if you want to add collaborators, and finally, how you submit. ahead of the deadline of the 2nd of December. Okay, so hopefully you can all see my screen. What I'm going to, the page I'm just going to walk through now is the challenge brief. This essentially contains all of the information around this particular challenge that's been set. A lot of this information you'll now be familiar with, as various members on the call today have started to open up and discuss a lot of the background information and the funding and so on and so forth. But essentially, this is the landing page where all of the information around the sustainable production of supply of food challenge sits. So I'm just going to briefly walk through from top to bottom. I'm not going to read this brief. You'll have all no doubt read this and continue to read this in your own time. I know that Faye Williams has put the link directly to this challenge in the chat a few times. So those of you that have clicked that link will be able to find this and follow along. We can see the total award for funding right at the top here. So 2.15 million, which is great. And as we go through this, then we can see the information around the background of the challenge. So a lot of this information you'll now be familiar with. The policy context as described earlier on, the 2 problem areas that are looking to be addressed. Essentially how your solutions can help with these challenges, and then those 2 problem target areas that were discussed just a moment ago. What's in scope, what's out of scope. So essentially this is going to display all the information that you'll need to know around this particular challenge, and you can obviously raise questions as previously mentioned. The 3 phases of contracts are also outlined in here, and then finally at the bottom we've got the key dates, and underneath that you can see the link to the briefing event that I'm sure a lot of you would have used in order to register for this event. What I'll do at some point during the next day or so is this link will change, and we'll have the video link for this call. If you do need to revisit anything that was mentioned today, this is the place where that will then sit. So I've accessed the challenge. My instructions are now to create an idea, complete every section and submit by the deadline. There's various documents and supporting guidance for you here in both in Welsh and in English. But if you go and click create your idea, this is where you'll then begin your submission. So you'll then arrive at a login screen. So I'm just going to log in with Microsoft, but you can put in an email address and password. And then you'll be taken through to the Simply Do site. This is the place where you'll be able to complete your idea, submit it, come back to it at any point and add kind of various team members to work on this with you. So now that I've registered and I'm inside Simply Do, this is plain and simple. All that you'll need to do is follow the format and complete every section inside of Simply Do ahead of the deadline and click submit. You can see the sections down the left-hand side of the page here, and that clicking one of those will just take you to that various section inside the platform. You can see the mandatory fields here that you'll need to complete ahead of submitting. If you'd like to work with someone within your team, within your department, all you need to do is click add a collaborator, and I can then send an email to someone that I want to work on this submission with, provided you're not editing exactly the same box at the same time. The platform will update as you complete this form. So you'll go through this process, completing every section ahead of the deadline, and once you've then completed everything and you're happy with it, you'll just click submit. That will then come through to the team, and this will then be placed into the number of responses ready for the assessment phase, and you'll receive an email confirming your submission. If you have any technical questions at all when you're in the Simply Do platform, all that you need to do is simply come down to the bottom right-hand side of the screen and open up a conversation with myself or another member of the Simply Do team, and we're happy to help with any technical responses to the platform usage. If it's a question around the challenge, the details, and the process in general, I'd recommend getting in touch with the SPRI team themselves. Okie dokie, I will stop sharing my screen and I assume pass back over to Gareth, maybe.
Yep, thanks Josh. So appreciate that. So that's the how to the how to apply, and as you can see, there's a fairly rigid process to adhere to there, and the deadline 2nd of July. But lots of help on hand for you to take you through that process. So I think we're slightly ahead of time here. What we planned on doing, we are available from 2 o'clock to answer questions. Please put, because of the number of people, we can't take live questions. So please, if you do have any, please type them into the chat. I'd suggest that we have about let's call it a 15-minute break to take us to, what would that be? About just after 2 o'clock. We'll keep the session open, obviously, but switch off your mics and your cameras. And in the background, we'll be collating any of the questions that come through in the chat, and then we'll have a session to go through and answer as many of those as we can from 2:05 onwards. So, if that all makes sense, I don't know if anybody from the wider team has anything else to add before we just pause for 10 minutes.
Just to let you know, Gareth, we've got 3 questions in the Q&A, so I don't know if you want to just go straight to them. It's up to you.
We could do, or do we give everyone a fair crack of the work? Maybe we should give a few minutes, Faye, and then we'll come back to them. Is that okay? Right. So we're 13:52 now, according to my computer. So should we reconvene at 2 o'clock then, and we'll start going through these questions? Okay. Thank you. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. Thanks. I can see there's quite a few questions in the Q&A section now, and for those of you who haven't spotted it, across the top, next to people, chat, and reactions, there's a Q&A button. So if you haven't spotted that before, you can see the questions there. So Faye, shall I hand over to you and you can take us through those questions? So.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so we've had a few come through the Q&A, and I think there's a couple in the chat as well. But I'll cover them all one by one. There's a couple that I'll just group together, asking a bit about scope at the beginning. So Fiona is asking if the scope covers land and sea, and Mohammed's also asking if drink is included in the challenge. So if someone can answer those together, possibly.
I'll jump in then, and please others do as well. But absolutely, land and sea. I mean, this is a localized supply sustainability challenge. So it depends which sea you're talking about, I suppose. But yes, absolutely. Wouldn't exclude that at all. Drink, I guess so. I mean, we haven't specifically spoken about that, but I don't know if any of the other members of the panel have any particular views on that. My feeling is yes, everything's as long as it's healthy, as long as it's integratable into the supply chain and generates a food economy. I don't see why not. But I don't know if anyone else has got any views on that.
The next
I
question.
agree, Gareth. I thought I'd better come in just in case you. Yeah, totally agree.
Okay, thanks, Kath.
Thank you. So the next question we've got is from Bruce, asking, would you say net zero farming innovation would be entertained? And he's given the example of off-grid green H2 generation, storage and utilisation on site for farm process. I know H2 powered tractors are now a thing, he says. So over to the panel.
No, absolutely. If we can, in an innovative way, reduce the carbon impact of standard farming practices, I'd see that as innovation. Yes, I mean, clearly they have to meet some of the other targets, local, healthy, sustainable, and all those other things. But yeah, absolutely. I should say as well, maybe we didn't touch on this, that we are fundamentally, clearly, we're after growing a local food economy, but that doesn't mean to say that you and your business and your idea needs to be a local one. So the innovation projects can, you can be based anywhere, really, as long as some of the deployment and some of the benefits are demonstrably able to happen in our region. They may happen in other regions as well. I guess lots of people want to localize the supply chains, but just to be clear, you do not have to be an organization based in this region to apply, but your ideas need to have applicability in the region, if that makes sense.
There's a question from Lucy. I don't know if it's an offer of help or there are some questions about what's needed for the application. So is access to land an issue for applicants? Will applicants need to own land? Is there a length of lease that will be required? Will planning permission be required? And then she's offered if anybody needs help on those aspects, her email address is in there. So I don't know if anyone wants to address those questions first of all.
Sorry, others, please feel free to join in. But from my perspective, we are really, I suppose, a good solution would have examined all of those issues in its application. We do hold some land as local authorities. It can be really complicated to get access to that land, I have to say. But if there are kind of drop dead moments where you absolutely need a piece of land to make a fantastic project work, we can certainly work with you. But I think your proposal, your application really needs to have considered all of those issues. If you think you might need planning consent, you'll need to do that research to see what that would add up to. Obviously, there are people here and there's facilities for you to ask those questions, but those proposals really need to cover some of those issues, I would say. And we are here to help, but you need to tell us exactly what you need and why that help might assist in making this a bigger and better project.
A question from Chase Sanders. Can a team from Cardiff Council apply for funding as part of a joint bid?
I better not answer this one. Right. So what I do know is that this is really aimed at organisations who can commercialise. So I don't know if we can bring in somebody either from the City Region or Innovate UK to talk about the rules and regulations about that. We've certainly participated in SBRIs before, but we've never really led them, if that for those commercialisation reasons. But I don't know if there's anybody, Rhiannon, maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit more.
Yeah, sorry, I just popped it, just popped back in, so I missed the start of the question. Apologies.
Yeah, I can ask the question again, Rhiannon. It's just somebody asking whether a team from Cardiff Council can apply for funding as part of a joint bid.
Not me.
So the bid, I guess the things to consider are the intellectual property in terms of who will own that. So the intellectual property will remain with the lead applicant, and our Cardiff City Council, the best guys to own that intellectual property. So there's absolutely nothing to stop them forming part of the project team, being a subcontractor into the works. But I would say that whoever is delivering the bulk of the work should be the lead applicant, because ultimately that's where the intellectual property is going to sit. But by all means, involve who you need to make sure you've got all the skills to fulfill your project. But yes, I would. There's no reason why they can't. But think very carefully first would be my advice.
Liz, did you want to come in, or have you just?
Yeah, I just want to. I'm not sure where we would stand legally in terms of Cardiff Council applying. So I am going to double check with that, and then we'll put it in the Q&A. My initial thought would be no, but just because of conflict of interests. But I will find that out for sure, and we can put that on the list.
Thank you, Liz.
And I suppose I should declare I've absolutely no knowledge of what a scheme like that should be. So Shay, thanks for your question, but yeah, that won't. Yeah, it's nothing that I'm aware of.
Okay, so I'll go on to the next question from Jonathan. Is it expected that commercialisation aspect of stage 1 application includes a higher level description of the proposed plans for delivering stage 3 in addition to stage 2?
Yeah, I think so. I think we talked about the kind of the market, the commercialization plan. So we would want. I mean, obviously details will come later, but we want to be convinced at the first stage that there is, an onward journey for this idea. So yes, high level for sure. Yeah, but we do want reference to that, and I think there's an awful lot more detail in the guidance notes that are available on the website that can help with that. But yes, yeah, I think we are interested in is this properly exploitable, this idea.
Okay, thank you. A question from Hugh about collaboration. So he says our proposition requires collaboration from existing growers and producers, upstream and downstream food consumers, public bodies, food outlets and consumers. Do you have a platform for networking and enabling collaborations to be seeded?
And Simply Do help us with this in terms of collaboration, or would that be through yourselves, Rhiannon?
So it's nothing I would get involved in.
Okay. It's a fair question, actually, in terms of opportunities to bring people together. Perhaps that's something we take away and come back with them, Faye.
Yeah, we can follow up with you.
Kate's coming through now. Thanks, Kate.
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to put Simply Do on the spot. So I think, as you said, something to consider afterwards. But it is something we have done through the Simply Do platform before in terms of enabling that collaboration. But again, I think a conversation offline, perhaps with Simply Do, to see if that's something we can consider for this challenge.
Thanks, Kate.
Yep, that makes sense to me.
Things we have done before as well is set up LinkedIn groups where people can collaborate and get in touch with each other. But we can put the details, follow on with the Q&As that are going to be uploaded. So the next question is from Islam. Would collaboration agreements need to be in place with all project partners for all 3 phases during the initial application phase? We believe partners needed for each phase will differ.
I think, you know, at the application stage, we want to see a clear, you know, who the consortium is. It may well be that people come in and out of that, but I think if there's somebody who isn't involved in phase 1 but definitely needs to be involved in phase 2, that'd be easy. If it's kind of an unknown body, then maybe there's a bit more information needed about that. But Kate, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just to say the subcontractors as part of that application can potentially change between each phase. But what I would say is that the challenge owner, the challenge lead, the lead applicant for that project would have to remain the same throughout. So just to make that clear. Thank you.
And I think to be fair, you know, we are judging on deliverability, aren't we? So, you know, if there's an unknown quantity in years to come, that might be perfectly reasonable, but we just really need to understand that story. Yeah.
I think the last question in the Q&A, I think I'll just check the chat, there are a couple more in there, but Sarah, just another question about, is there a way of finding out if others are interested in developing a similar area, what they're interested in? So I guess that follows on from the collaboration question, and just for Sarah, we'll put that information up and we'll follow it up later on. I know there was one question in the chat from Jono, but I think that's followed on by a couple more.
I can also see that Pearl Costello is offering a chat there to Hugh as well.
Okay, perfect. The question from Jono was, is there any scope for flexibility in the timescale of delivery for phase 2 and 3 to account for the fact that many horticultural crops planted in March and April cannot generally be harvested and sold until July or September?
Seems like a great question. I'm going to go to Liz, I think, in terms of the spend profile and how that might be affected by any substantial change to the timetable. Liz, do you have any particular view on that?
Sorry, was that about slippage?
It's not so much about slippage. Jono's question is that, you know, there are obviously logical times in the year for harvesting, and that might not correspond exactly with our timetable. So, yeah, is there flexibility around that?
There would be flexibility within spending as long as there was no slippage. So if it was all spent within one financial year, or even spend, you know, moving across financial years, we could certainly look at that. But what we couldn't do is slip the budget any further, if that makes sense. So obviously we've got an agreed spend profile, which is estimated. So yeah, we could certainly look at moving some of that around. Yeah, it would be on a sort of case by case basis, really.
I think just to add to, thanks Liz, to add to that, I mean, in the feasibility stage, if an issue like that is really, really clear, then that almost becomes part of the proposition for phase 2. So that we can make a proper and fair assessment of it at the time. I think, you know, as ever, there will be deadlines on spending the money, so we can't, you know, have an indefinite period over which we spend this. So applicants will need to be mindful of that. But yeah, if there's a real drive like that makes it just, you know, illogical to do it any other way, then we'd be happy to see that as part of the initial feasibility work, I think.
No more questions in the Q&A, and I think the comments that are in the chat are just some useful links that people have shared and responses to some of the questions. So I think that covers everything. Oh, one's just come in. Just a comment from Bruce: those that have elements missing in their application and will be looking for a collaborator to plug the gap, one option would be to ask Innovate UK for suggestions, KTN for suggestions. It's what they do in all sectors day in, day out, and he's provided a link there to the agri-food section for KTN. I think that's everything, unless anybody's got any other questions.
Okay, fantastic. So we're excited to have this project and to be running it. It's as I say, it's not kind of a mainstream thing for local government people, but we're really you know, we are experiencing more and more problems that might be solved in this way. So thank you very much for your time. I hope that it's an attractive proposition for many of you to get into. As I said, we will be developing a frequently asked questions page, so please keep on posting your questions in the Simply Do portal. We'll do our best to answer those. It seems like there is a particular issue around facilitating collaboration, so maybe we can have a think about that and how to make that. I know there are lots of ways that exist within the Innovate UK and wider family to do that, but maybe if the project team will put a little bit of thought into that over the next few days to make that a bit more. And I can see there are comments coming in about people willing to either collaborate or help to join the dots here. Okay, so I don't know if any actual further questions are coming or whether they comment. Faye, is there anything else we need to deal with, or I think we've covered it?
No.
Right, okay. All right then, so thank you very much for giving us your time today. As I say, thanks to all the panel and all the speakers. And yes, very much looking forward to seeing what fantastic ideas you're going to propose to us. So thank you very much and have a good day.
Thanks, Gareth. Thanks all.